We are deeply honored to have with us today Sri B.V.R. Subramanian, CEO NITI Aayog, Ms. Muthu J.P. Singh, DG PID, our distinguished fellow Ms. Devjani Ghosh, Professor Mayank Srivastava, Program Director Sri Yugal Joshi, all the Program Directors of NITI Aayog, members of media and our colleagues from NITI Aayog. Your presence adds great value to this occasion as we explore the promise of 2D materials for India's future. With this, I take the opportunity to invite Ms. Devjani Ghosh to kindly deliver the opening remarks.
Good morning, everyone. I think in the recent weeks, we've been seeing a lot of discussions as global leaders have been getting together. And we've been hearing a lot about national power, national influence, and how do you build these things. And while in the past, countries have typically used the size of their GDP, the size of the industry, their military might, how much of access they have to natural resources like oil to define national power and influence, that access is completely changing. So what you're seeing now is technologies like semiconductor. Who has access to semiconductor supply chain? Who controls semiconductor supply chain? Data flow. Who controls the data flows of the world? Who controls access to clean energy? Who controls access to rare minerals? These are becoming the new levers that will determine or that are determining not just economic growth, but resilience, national security, and geopolitical influence. Who has the influence, right? And this is one of the key areas that NITI's Frontier Tech Hub is focused on. Our mandate is to look 5 to 10 years down the line to understand what are some of these really big, mega, disruptive tech shifts that is going to happen. Because if you look at these tech shifts, those who win are the ones who spot them early. You spot them early, you start understanding them, you start planning for them. And that's what countries like US, China have typically done. And that's where we want to take India now. We want to ensure, because we are in this era where we are going to see much bigger shifts than anything we have seen till now. We all talk about AI, but the next big tech shift is going to be way bigger than AI. And we have the time to spot these early, figure out how to build our readiness. And that's what NITI Frontier Tech Hub does. We look at things 10 years down the line, we spot these trends, we understand them, and then we feed that insight into government, into relevant stakeholders to say, this is what's going to happen, this is the impact, the good and the bad, and this is what India needs to do to get ahead of the curve. As part of that entire exploration process, one of the things we have been studying is how the rules of competition has been changing. And the rules of competition are today pretty much being drawn around what the world calls tech choke points. So the world is looking at control of supply chains, critical supply chains, control of supply chains, control of standards. In tech, you lead if you set standards, otherwise you follow. And last but not the least, who's building what alliances, strategic alliances. So these three things, supply chain, standards and alliances, are defining the choke points and are also defining how does the geopolitical play entirely span out, right? And among the most critical choke points, the one that absolutely stands out, which is the foundation of all scientific and industrial progress, you cannot have scientific and industrial progress without it, is semiconductor. This is sort of the number one choke point that the world is focused on. The United States, we know, has built tremendous commanding head start and unmatched control of fabs, EDA tools, IP core, etc., etc. The entry barrier for new people who want to get into this is very high. Very, not impossible, but it is very high. And therefore, a catch-up strategy becomes very difficult. So when you're thinking about technologies like semicon, you have to think about a disruptive strategy. And this is where 2D materials becomes very, very interesting. Because what we are seeing is, when we look at semicon or we look at any of the other critical supply chains, What we study in the Frontier Tech Hub is what are the fault lines? What are the fault lines? What are the opportunities to reshape the value chain? What are the opportunities to bypass entrenched advantages and also to leapfrog? And when you do that analysis for the semicon value chain, one of the things that stand out is material science. And this is where 2D materials becomes very interesting. They represent pretty much a once-in-generation opportunity to break into the next wave of semiconductor and quantum technologies, not by following the old path, but pretty much rewriting the rules, right? So if silicon was it defined, was the anchor on which, the bedrock on which the semicon landscape of yesterday and today is defined, then 2D material is going to be the bedrock on which the semicon landscape of tomorrow will be defined. So we have the time and we have the capabilities, I believe, to start acting today to safeguard our semicon future and build a very disruptive leapfrog strategy. So that's why the focus of our fourth issue of our quarterly insights, Future Front, is on introduction to 2D material. We worked with one of the best institutes in the country that is focused on this topic, IISc, to develop this. And we've developed this in a way that it's easily understandable, it's not a lot of science. It's easily understandable, but at the same time, I hope it communicates the urgency, because that is very, very important. So to talk more about it, I would request Professor Mayank Srivastava to just take you all in a very simple way into the world of 2D material and why India needs to care about it.
Media friends. So I have a slide deck and I will try to keep it, as Jenny said, simple in language, something which is understood, and still try to emphasize on the importance of this technology. Devjani used two keywords. One is 2D material, which is the theme of this particular session, and the other is silicon. So let me start with silicon. Silicon is basically the technology which is on which pretty much everything that we see today is based on. Even this microphone to your cameras, and pretty much every technology, every electronics that you see around is based on silicon. But silicon has already come to a point where you cannot further advance the technology, right? Now I'll build on this a little further, but first understand that what is called, if somebody has to become superpower or tomorrow superpower, what are the key elements needed, right? You need, as Devjani explained, you need access to technology, you need ownership on the technology. If you see the current manufacturing strategy, the current strategy in pretty much every sector, including semicon or electronics, we are doing manufacturing or embarking on manufacturing using licensed technology. Now, if we develop or we manufacture using licensed technology, there is an umbilical cord which is built in from the place, the country or the organization from where the technology has been licensed, and that umbilical cord can always be pulled back or twisted against a nation. So the question is, or the fundamental question is, can a democracy like India or a largest democracy like India become a superpower with such an umbilical cord built in? While the manufacturing approach is important to build an ecosystem, but at the same time we have to put efforts in addressing this umbilical cord going forward in the longer term. So the question is, how do we address this? The answer is, we have to jump the roadmap and work on things which are targeted in future. This is what Devjani explained as disruptive technologies. So we jump the roadmap rather than always playing the catch-up game. We jump the roadmap as well parallelly, and develop self-reliance in areas which are projected to take lead in future. So the path is very clear. You want to become technology leader, you invest in future tech, you own intellectual properties, then you manufacture using homegrown technology. In that case, there is no umbilical cord, there is no arm twisting, right? So the bottom line is, if you want to become a leader or tech leader, you have to invest in the next generation. Now, this is where the difference between, or the transition from silicon to 2D materials come in context of the semicon leadership. So as I said, silicon is a technology on which pretty much everything is based on today, but silicon has already come to a point where you cannot advance it any further. This is something which all industry roadmaps talk about, all tech leaders talk about, right? So silicon has already come to a point that you cannot advance anything further. Now this is where the 2D materials come, and as you know, the nature want advancement, the nature want things to become better and better. The tech wants advancement, the industry wants advancement. So what can advance? If you look into all options, the 2D material is where everyone is betting, including the industries. I'll show some data later on. Right? Now the other advantage of 2D material, which I'll talk about later, that not only it can replace anything and everything that silicon has done, but can also create newer opportunities, newer applications which so far have not been possible, right? But the fact is that, given the status where the world is today the world is going to work with us, but if we delay any further, we are going to lose this opportunity also to lead or work with others on equal footing, and we will miss this bus as well. Now, this is a little technical slide. The next one, I'll explain the promises of 2D materials. So as I said, the 2D materials can not only replace the what silicon can offer, but it also creates newer opportunities to advance the silicon technology further. For example, suppose today the most advanced chips would integrate close to 10 billion basic building blocks, which are called transistors, right? So now you cannot integrate further. You want to build more advanced functionalities, you want your chips to be more advanced, more capable, you have to integrate more transistors in it, which the silicon cannot cater to. But 2D materials can cater to, because it can be further miniaturized beyond what silicon's limit is. And that is where 2D comes into picture. So 2D materials industry even projects that one can integrate to a trillion transistor kind of a chip. You can imagine the significant, not only the significant performance improvement that you can achieve, but also significant capability building within a single chip that is also possible. Now on top of that, it also caters to several newer areas which so far was not possible with the conventional technology, if we want to call silicon as a conventional technology in the 2D context, right? And a range of areas including quantum technologies. In fact, 2D material is the only platform which basically caters to all four verticals of quantum technologies, be it computing, be it communication, be it metrology or sensing, right? Whereas that capability does not exist with any other platform. So now, tomorrow, what you can also do is you can think of building newer applications which are integration of these unique, distinct applications which so far did not happen. I'll talk about this a little later. For example, in this slide, what I call as heterogeneous integration of classical systems and classical quantum systems, right? So for example, you want to build an artificial vision or artificial eye or artificial skin or artificial nose. These ideas are there, in literature since ages, but a practical realization has not happened because of the capability of a single platform which can enable multiple features, which is possible with 2D material or 2D material based silicon platform, which can enable these kind of newer disruptive applications on top of replacing or advancing the previous applications which we talked about, including quantum, for example, right? I mean, today when you see these quantum computers, you see these big dilution fridges with a small quantum chip sitting. And why there are these big massive systems? Because all the electronics that control the qubit sits outside that dilution fridge. Now you can think of also integrating all that inside the same chip that sits with this quantum computer, right? So similarly there are many disruptive newer applications which are possible, which so far were not there. Now on top of that, you can also augment silicon technology with 2D materials. So that also helps in creating newer disruptive applications which did not happen or were not possible earlier. It also caters to many strategic applications which pretty much every strategic agency looks for, wants for, but they are usually difficult to achieve because of the limitations that silicon or a similar kind of a conventional platform would offer. Now, if you look at the market opportunity, the semiconductor market is expected to grow to $1 trillion by 2030. So that's the existing market, and that can be replaced by 2D materials in the years to come. I'm not saying that by 2030 or 2035, but in the years to come, right? But on top of that, because of the newer applications I talked about, the disruptive applications I talked about, this creates a significantly bigger, newer market, which will happen or which will be possible only because of the 2D material-based platform, right? Now, if you see the worldwide effort, so it's not like everyone is only talking about it and the work has to happen. The world has already progressed significantly, but not progressed so much that one can say that we have missed the bus. But it's worth highlighting that the world is already there. The world has already invested more than $1 billion on this particular technology. There are more than 10 leading centers around the world. You name any major economy or advanced country, there is a leading center advancing in 2D materials-based semiconductor quantum technologies. In fact, several startups have also come up, and several industries, leading industries such as Intel, TSMC, the list is long. They have also started investing on this. In fact, they are, every month you would see some news from one of the big leading companies advancing the state-of-the-art of 2D materials. I'll stop at this point, but I'll summarize that, as I said, while the 2D materials-based technology platform is the key enabler for future technologies or future heterogeneously integrated classical and quantum systems, effort in the country, in our country, in India, are required to be scaled up. It's a technology that the country can encash. But the fact is that today the leading players will be willing to work with us and willing to work with us on equal footing. Equal footing is the key word, but if we delay, this exchange is going to be difficult, and once it's matured in other nations, as I said, it's still not matured, but once it's matured in other nations, we will be, we will look similar as we are today in context of the silicon technology. Thank you.
It's
mind-blowing, wasn't it?
Yeah, excellent.
So, welcome, friends. I think you have had a very lovely exposition on critical frontier technology and why this frontier hub exists in NITI. There's a lot happening in the world, as it should. And there's a lot happening in the science and technology world, as it should. But the question is somebody scanning all it? Is somebody studying what is happening? And is somebody trying to get that into the government system, sensitize the government system, sensitize the entire ecosystem of public and private, and get the entire ecosystem to start acting? I think that is the purpose of Frontier Tech Hub. As Devjani said in the beginning, the idea of Frontier Tech Hub is not to look at what exists today. What we are looking at in the Frontier Tech Hub is what is it that is going to disrupt the way the world or the economy is functioning tomorrow, day after, 10 years from now, and 50 years from now. And the early bird gets the worm. The earlier you spot it, the better position you are. And I think that's a very, very important lesson. Who are the most developed countries in the world today? These are people who have been ahead of the curve in science and technology. I mean, the industrial revolution happened in UK. Now, why it happened, let's not go into the history, but it happened. And that gave them a lead for 200 years, and they ruled large parts of the world. And that was immediately followed by large parts of Europe. I mean, till England had the industrial revolution, Europe was what mattered in Europe. UK didn't matter. England was a small country in Europe. It was not a power. It became a power thanks to the industrial revolution. And it was largely driven by science and technology. It was driven largely by the steam engine and a whole host of production technologies which makes them a manufacturing power. And then they went around the world. And then the Britannia rules the waves, and the sun never sets on the British Empire. And so on, it was followed by Europe. What happened? 2 wars, America caught up, and what you saw in the 20th century, particularly after the Second World War, is the dominance of the American economy in the world, driven by science and technology. What makes America a leader in the world is not Coca-Cola or Pepsi. It is actually, the IBMs of the world, followed by the Intels, and then followed by the Apples, and now followed by all the companies. and all the other companies which are actually taking America to the frontiers as far as technology is concerned. It's the education system, it's the manufacturing system, and the corporate system working very, very closely together with support from government, which has kept America in the leadership position. I mean, that's something we all must realize. I mean, the total investment by the 5 big tech firms in the US in the last 1 year, 24, and being planned in 25, exceed their investments in the last 25 years, cumulatively. In 1 year, they're investing more money than they invested in 25 years. The kind of money which the giants, the top 5, Nvidia, Microsoft, and Apple, Google, etc., are investing in currently AI, but all related stuff, is mind-boggling, which is more than what most nation states do. And I think that's something to remember. And what has happened is in our own neighborhood, we have a major economy, China, which has actually aggressively pursued the path to modernization. China began with low-cost, labor-intensive manufacturing, mastered it, but mind you, at the end of it, they were still just 10% of world manufacturing capacity. And then in 2015, they started a Made in China program, where they were not talking about shoes, clothes, and garments. They said, we will go into high-tech areas. And today you see them in leadership positions, in EVs, in multiple areas, in defense technologies. They are there. There is this old story that they make the hardware, India makes the software. Who produced the first big LLM outside the United States? You had the DeepSeek coming as a challenger to ChatGPT. It didn't come out of India. So what I mean is, there's a transformation that happened there because there was directed funding, whole host of support, and industry, academia, all of them worked together, and they decided to crack technology. And suddenly you are suddenly seeing that this is a country on the horizon, which has now suddenly emerged, and now it is actually becoming a leading power in a large number of technologies. So the underpinning of modern economies, and particularly if you want to be a globally relevant nation, is technology. And I think that's very, very important. And I think that's the direction India is moving. And I think that's the vision of our Prime Minister. When he says India should be a developed economy has many attributes. And one of the major attributes is it has a major science and technology ecosystem feeding that into the normal economy. And normal economy includes manufacturing, agriculture, services. If you look at the vision which is being finalized and talked about in NITI, out of the big 3 pillars which are there, one is individuals, that is health, education and related stuff. The second is economy, which is all the sector, and the third is science and technology. Without science and technology, India being a developed nation is going to be much more difficult. And as Professor Srivastava said in the beginning, you can't live on borrowed technology. You have to have technological ownership, only then will you get technological leadership. Yesterday, I think we are having the Semicon, which was inaugurated yesterday by the Prime Minister, and we had the Dutch firm which was there, which was also, they were speaking. They make the machines which make the chips.
Yeah.
They are the
Yes,
only company that has the
Yes,
technology and access to it. Is. It doesn't matter. It can be TSMC, it can be India, it can be United States. There is only one company in the world which dominates the technology to make the thinnest silicon wafer chips. And when somebody was putting sanctions on a particular country, apart from their own stuff, they asked this company not to supply. Because it is their supply which makes it critical for you to be able to make higher and higher and more advanced chips. So I think control of technology is very, very important. And that determines not only our position as an economy, but also our security as well as our capacity to control the future. And I think that is very, very important. And I think that realization is there in India. And that's why we have the NRF, which is a huge amount of money being committed at 50,000 crores. We have the private sector R&D fund, which is actually about 1 lakh crores, not only announced in the budget, but being rolled out, approved by the cabinet. 1.5 lakh crores has been the $20 billion being committed by the government only for R&D from TRL 1 to 5 and 5 to 9, which is product in the market. Take this on. So what has been Frontier Tech Hub doing? It's been looking over the horizon, alerting the system and influencing policy. I mean, my colleagues here in NITI are almost there in every committee. With the quantum mission, with the AI mission, with here and there. They're working with the PSA. The job of this hub is to get all the inputs from the real world outside and feed it into government. And one of the tasks they're doing, and there will be a lot of reports now coming out we're coming out about 25 reports in the next 6 months. And the first 4 are going to come out 2 weeks from now. In the week of 15th September, there will be 4 report releases. Each is telling you what the frontier technology are going to affect some particular sector or aspect of life. That's one side. The other is just to open people's eyes. They're coming out with the quarterly insights. And they've done said this is the 4th. They've come out with 3 earlier editions. Each is telling you one aspect of some technology which is affecting us, and today's issue is on 2D. You had a wonderful exposition on what 2D technologies are, etc. This is a new material stuff. 1 atom thick, but it can be so efficient, so much more productive, so much more conductive, so many more times better than copper, so much stronger than steel. Think of how the world will change if you have a atom thick material which is stronger than steel. I mean, the world will look very, very big. Look at how transistors and now semiconductors have changed your old radio. Radio meant you sat in the drawing room, whole family sat around it to listen to a broadcast 50 years ago. People don't even remember that was what a radio was, you know. And today you don't even have normal transistor radios. Your mobile phone will play your FM or whatever. So the world has changed. This is going to be even more dramatic, etc. But it's essential, as I said, that India has leadership. And I think that's what Professor Srivastava and the Frontier Tech Command are urging, that we need to have leadership, and that's what this report will just pass on. Everything will be uploaded just now, and I request Frontier Tech to also upload the presentation so that people get to know the technical aspects. You know, there's going to be a high degree of interest in the long run.
Yeah.
This is not news for tomorrow. This is news for a long time. You know, the second part is you need to invest in people. You need to invest in R&D. You need to invest in creating supply chains, and finally products and manufacturing. I think we need to create the entire ecosystem for 2D. We missed the bus in semiconductor, and today we are playing the catch-up game, and we are catching up fast. The question is, do you want to be the catch-up person, or do you want to be the I lead the pack person? If you lead, you have a first mover advantage. You dominate the sector, and I think that's what it is. And so this is a very key future technology that is there, and we are not the only ones. What is being pointed out is there are already people who are waking up. You saw the amounts there, 10 centers, 5 countries, you know, USA, China, Japan, South Korea, they're all putting money in Europe. We are the 5th largest, 4th largest economy in the world. Any day we have crossed Japan. I think we should be investing in similar terms, and I'm sure the government will do that. You see, graphene has been talked about for a while, but graphene was just one way of using it. But I think there are so many more ways of using it. And if you don't actually do it, you'll get locked out. And then you'll be licensing. You know, India makes such huge exports and services to the United States. But our services trade with US is actually quite balanced. What does US get in return? Royalties. They get royalties for the technology they lend to you. So I think royalties are also a major export. So if you actually control technology, it's also an export, and you also control the way it goes in future. So I think this is a wake-up call for India to take up leadership position. Lot has to be done. Centers of excellence have to be set up in IITs, IISCs, other technological institutes. We need to, and these have to be done in both semiconductors. You can see new types. It also have to be in application,
Yes.
which is, you know, healthcare, security, energy, mobility. All of that will change. It will change the way your cars are run, your batteries are made, etc. And we need to create a mission mode approach to get us going. And the future is not far away. 2033 is not far away. 8 years is nothing. Forget life of a nation, even the life of a human being, you know. So I think, I mean, our government has been around for 11 years. So 8 years is actually a fraction of that. So I think if we do it, we will see the results in the near future. And I think we have the technological capabilities in India. That's the good thing. The good thing is we have the brain power. If we match the brain power with our willpower, I'm sure we can be a genuine power. You know, and I think that's the thing. And the bottom line is we need to have a strategy. We need to have a mission mode approach to dominate. It will be very, very interesting reading. Take it around, pass it on to all the people around you, particularly the younger lot. They are the ones who are going to make the best use of it. Thank you very much, and my compliments to both IISc for helping us and Devjani and her team. Thank you.
I will leave one fun fact for you all. The size of a typical 2D material, right? Pluck a piece of your hair, pluck one hair. Can you slice it into 80,000 parts? Okay? If you are successful, then one of that 80,000 is the size of an atom. That's the size of the 2D material that we are talking about. Just a fun fact for all of you.
Almost invisible.
It is invisible.
So I'll just make a submission, like, the world looks at where the money goes. Everybody follows the money trail. So there are a number of foundations in bus.
आपने जो टूटी की बात की है या जो इनोवेशन की बातें हुई, हम सब लोग जानते हैं कि ये बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट है और देश के लिए एवरीथिंग हैज टू बी डन। इसमें लेकिन प्रॉब्लम यहाँ पे आती है कि जैसे कैलिफोर्निया है या जो और भी यूरोपियन स्टेट्स हैं, वो एक कंट्री एक चीज़ को देखता है और वहाँ पे एक कंसोर्टियम है, और हम लोगों के यहाँ आप डिपेंड करते हैं इंडिविजुअल्स के ऊपर या इंस्टीट्यूट के ऊपर, जो कि यहाँ पे दे आर नॉट पैरामाउंट, दे डोंट स्टैंड एनीवेयर। अवर एजुकेशन सिस्टम इज अबाउट 120 द इंडेक्स, वर्ल्ड इंडेक्स। सो हाउ फार द नीति आयोग, जिसके पास ये फैसिलिटेशन है या जो सरकार ने आपको दिया हुआ है, तो इसको आप कैसे आगे बढ़ाने का, और इसमें रिसर्च सेंटर और जो भी, क्योंकि अगर लैब नहीं होगी तो टेस्टिंग नहीं होगी, तो डिफरेंट टाइप ऑफ लैब्स हैं उसमें एटॉमिक भी है, सब कुछ है। तो आप इसके लिए क्या करना चाहते हैं?
एक चीज हमारे देश में हो गया ऐतिहासिक, आज नहीं बरसों से चला है कि हमारे यहाँ शिक्षा एक जगह होती है और अनुसंधान दूसरी जगह होता है। ये एक बहुत बड़ी कमजोरी है। मैंने शिक्षा यूनिवर्सिटीज में चल रहा है, यूनिवर्सिटीज में रिसर्च नहीं होता है, और हम लोगों ने क्या किया, अनुसंधान को एक स्पेसिफिक एक्टिविटी समझ के उसको रिसर्च इंस्टीट्यूट में धकेल दिया। बाकी दुनिया में देखेंगे, बर्कली चले जाए, स्टैनफोर्ड चले जाए, कैम्ब्रिज चले जाए, तो वो एक ही जगह होता है। इसी से क्या है, वही टीचर जो पढ़ा है, वही टीचर हमारे प्रोफेसर साहब बैठे हैं, रिसर्च भी कर रहे हैं और पढ़ा भी रहे हैं। उसमें क्या है, इनका जो ज्ञान है नौजवानों को भी आ रहा है और साथ साथ रिसर्च भी हो रहा है। तो ये जो तालमेल है वो मिसिंग था, एक तरह से कुछ जगहों पे तोड़ा गया है। IIT से एक एग्जाम्पल है, IISc एक एग्जाम्पल है, बट अगर हम जापान बड़ा देश में देखेंगे तो ये गिने चुने जगहों में, और अगर हम दूसरी देखेंगे हमारे देश में 97% बच्चे, 97% बच्चे स्टेट यूनिवर्सिटीज में पढ़ते हैं, केवल 3% भारत सरकार यूनिवर्सिटीज। देश में 1600 यूनिवर्सिटीज है, ज्यादातर कौन चलाते, 1500 से ज्यादा। तो जब तक वहां अनुसंधान नहीं लाया जाता, वहां नहीं होता, तब तक एक व्यापक रूप में नहीं बने। वो फौज जो खड़ी होती है ना, वो नहीं होगी, और उसमें नीति कर रहा है। मैं कहूँगा अलग से, क्योंकि आपको इसमें रुचि है। हमारे यहाँ डॉक्टर सारस्वत हैं और एक डॉक्टर विपिन सिंह है, जो हमारे सीनियर एडवाइजर हैं, प्रोग्राम डायरेक्टर। इनके साथ बैठ के चर्चा करिए, आपको बेशक आपको बहुत मटीरियल मिलेगा। एक स्टेट्स की यूनिवर्सिटी में रिसर्च कैसा बढ़ाया जाए, नंबर 1, उस पर आपने रिपोर्ट निकाल रहे हैं, आने वाला है शीघ्र ही। दूसरा, मिनिस्ट्रीज के साथ काम कर रहे हैं, UGC के साथ, हायर एजुकेशन और साइंस एंड टेक्नोलॉजी। पर केवल अपने ही बच्चों वाले संस्थाओं को मत दो, उनको भी दो। यहाँ 97% लोग हैं, जब तक आप उसका स्तर नहीं उठाओगे ना, फिर हम केवल एम्प्लॉय बनेंगे फैक्ट्रियों में, न कि हम रिसर्चर और टेक्नोलॉजिस्ट जो नए डेवलमेंट करने का। ये है जो हमारे जो वर्ल्ड क्लास थॉट लीडर्स आते हैं, वो ये गिने चुने इंस्टीट्यूशन से आ रहे हैं। हमें चाहिए कि हमारी छोटी छोटी जगहों में, भोपाल हो या भुवनेश्वर हो या रायपुर हो, वहां से यूनिवर्सिटी से भी इस प्रकार के लोग निकले, तब ये व्यापक तौर पर होगा। दिमाग में है, इसीलिए ये जो जंप है ना, अभी जहां हम हैं और विकसित करने में बहुत लंबा सफर है, बहुत मेहनती सफर है। एकाग्रता के साथ काम नहीं करेंगे ना, तो पहुंच नहीं पाएंगे। धन्यवाद।
सो इन सब के ऊपर सबसे एक और चीज जो बहुत जरूरी है, जो बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट है, वो है सोसाइटल माइंडसेट। सो हमारे देश में जो माइंडसेट है, जो मानसिकता है, वो ये है कि रिसर्च वो करता है जो कुछ और नहीं कर पाया, जबकि दूसरे देशों में मानसिकता और सीधी है कि रिसर्च वो करता है जो बाकी सब कर सकता है। ये मानसिकता चेंज होना बहुत जरूरी है। मैं आपको एग्जांपल देता हूँ। जब मैं IISc ज्वाइन करने के पहले इंटेल में था, सो जब मैं वापस इंडिया आ रहा था, मेरा बैंक अकाउंट इंटेल के कैंपस में था। मैं अपना बैंक अकाउंट क्लोज करने गया, उन्होंने पूछा, बैंक क्लर्क ने पूछा कि आप क्यों क्लोज कर रहे हैं। मैंने बोला मैं इंडिया वापस जा रहा हूँ, विच वॉज अ लिटिल सरप्राइज, क्योंकि जनरली लोग इंडिया से यूएस जाते हैं। उन्होंने पूछा इंडिया वापस क्यों जा रहे हो, तो मैंने बताया कि आई एम गोइंग टू बिकम द प्रोफेसर वन ऑफ द टॉप इंस्टीट्यूट इन द कंट्री। मैं देश के, इंडिया के सबसे बड़े रिसर्च संस्थान में प्रोफेसर बनने जा रहा हूँ। और वहां पर बैंक क्लर्क को समझ में आ गया कि एक रिसर्च इंस्टीट्यूट का प्रोफेसर क्या होता है, वो क्या करता है। सेम सिनेरियो यहाँ पे इंडिया में वो नहीं है। इवन बैंगलोर में या किसी IIT तो चलो ठीक है, लोग लैंडमार्क से जानते हैं। IISc में बैंगलोर में अगर आप किसी को बोलेंगे कि IISc कहाँ है, तो शायद उनको मेजॉरिटी को नहीं पता है।
सर ये जो सिलेबस है ना रिसर्चर के पास या 2D के लिए, ये हमारे, जब आप उनके पास कोई सिलेबस नहीं होगा तो मुझे कैसे पता चलेगा कि क्या पढ़ना है और कहाँ कैसे रिसर्च करें। बस इतनी बात मैं बताना चाहता हूँ, क्या ये सिलेबस यहाँ अवेलेबल हो सकता है, क्योंकि आप तो बाहर भी पढ़ के आए, यहाँ भी पढ़ के। बस
मेरी जो PhD की पढ़ाई हुई है वो इंडिया में हुई है। मेरी एक लाइन से आंसर हो जाना चाहिए, बट और मेरी पढ़ाई हुई 20 साल हो गए। ये उस टाइम की बात है जब इंटरनेट उतना एडवांस नहीं था, चैट GPT तो बिल्कुल नहीं था, यूट्यूब पे कुछ नहीं होता था। सिलेबस जो आप बोल रहे हैं या जो नॉलेज या इंफॉर्मेशन बोल रहे हैं, वो हमें ढूंढना पड़ता था लाइब्रेरीज में या बुक्स में या इधर उधर, फिर भी हमने कर लिया, राइट। मेरी पढ़ाई IIT बॉम्बे से हुई, PhD से हुई, फिर हम यूएस चले गए। तो आज की डेट में सारा इंफॉर्मेशन इंटरनेट पे अवेलेबल है। द वर्ल्ड हैज बिकम मच मोर ग्लोबल, मच मोर कनेक्टेड। ऐसा कोई कोना किसी दुनिया का नहीं है जहां पे उसके पास कम इंफॉर्मेशन है कंपेयर टू एनी अदर कॉर्नर, जहां पे कोई कह सके कि भाई ज्यादा इंफॉर्मेशन है। तो अगर 20 साल पहले ये पॉसिबल था तो अभी पॉसिबल है। इसलिए मैंने बात रेज की कि माइंडसेट चेंज होना जरूरी है। तो माइंडसेट चेंज होगा जब हमारे देश के यंग बच्चे इंस्पायर होंगे साइंटिस्ट से, एंड नॉट नॉट टेक नेम बट नॉट बेसिकली दोज हु मेक क्विक मनी, जिनका जल्दी फेमस हो जाते हैं और जो जल्दी पैसा बनाते हैं। जब वो साइंटिस्ट से इंस्पायर होंगे, साइंस से इंस्पायर होंगे, तो अपने आप ही सोसाइटी चेंज आ जाएगा।
मैं यही कहूँगा, देश में 1 लाख और माइंड जो देश अपने आप बदल